Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might have the wish I wish tonight. Well, it's still better than Tom Hanks, right? All right. Today we're talking about wishes. Welcome to Teacup for One. My name is Matt and I have 2 degrees. And you know what? With Disney's Wish having come out recently, I came to a startling realization, and that was that everything I associate with wishes and wishing seems to come from Disney. The whole concept of wishing and wish fulfillment is so heavily ingrained in Disney films that I can't think of a non-Disney inspired example of wishing in pop culture. And I mean, sure, there are a ton of non-Disney movies that deal with wishing, but I think there's a case to be made for all of them building on the foundation of wishing that Disney has been setting since Snow White in 1937. They created this idea that if you want something bad enough and your heart is pure and you put that wish out into the world, magical things can happen. Did I just quote Friends?
If you want something enough and your heart is pure, wondrous things can happen.
So, did Disney create that idea? I mean, surely Disney didn't invent the idea of wishing, right? 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 Well, that is the question that sponsored today's video. Hey, speaking of sponsors, today's video is brought to you by my Etsy store. The Teacup for One t-shirt t-shop is now available on Etsy. Parody t-shirts designed by me, lovingly inspired by theater and theme parks. Check out the Teacup for One t-shirt t-shop today and you can get your very own Matata It Means Worry shirt, alongside a bunch of other shirts. If you're watching this video when it first drops, there's probably like a Black Friday or an extended holiday sale happening, and if not, go to the Etsy store anyway. I need money. Anyway, let's talk about wishing. I think it's a pretty basic human desire to put a thought or a dream out into the world and hope that the universe will provide. And over time, different people and cultures began to develop rituals surrounding wishing and wish fulfillment. You know, it is such an ancient practice that I don't think there's any record of the first wish. And honestly, there probably is. I just couldn't find it, and I said that to sound smart. Anytime I tried Googling first wish, I kept getting redirected to trumpeter Chris Bottie's first album. It looks good. When it comes to Disney, I would say there are 3 main methods of wishing in the Disney universe. Number 1, the wishing well. I would call this a transactional wish. Number 2, a magic lamp plus a genie. I would call this a power trip wish. And number 3, the gold standard, a wish upon a star. I would call this a pure wish. And spoiler warning, no, Disney did not invent any of these, but they did use them, and they popularized them, and they kind of shifted how people in the 20th/21st century think of them. Let's start by looking at the most basic form of wishing, a wishing well.
I'm wishing. You're basic.
This is probably the form of wishing that everyone has done at least once in their life. I mean, it's just second nature at this point. You see a well or a fountain, you toss a coin in, you make a wish, and maybe it'll come true. Maybe it won't. So it's fitting that a wishing well played such an integral role in the Disney animated classic that started it all, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Like, truthfully, if you think about it, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, that movie has it all. It set the groundwork for, like, everything Disney. There's a prince, there's a princess, there's lovable sidekicks. There is the ultimate Disney villain because the evil queen can do it all. She can either be like the glamorous, gorgeous villain, or she can be the terrifying villain. Like, get you a Disney villain who can do it all. And of course, it has a wishing well.
I'm wishing.
You're basic.
And in an uncharacteristic move for Disney animation, including a wishing well in Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs was actually kind of culturally accurate. Kind of. Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs takes place in Germany, like unofficially. I mean, the German pavilion is where you meet Snow White in Epcot, so that's enough of a confirmation for me. And the concept of a wishing well appears to have originated in Germanic and Celtic cultures. Now, to them, wells were very important and sometimes sacred places. Why? Because of the water. Now, we all know water is important, right? I mean, that goes without saying. Water gives life. Water sustains life. Water is everything. And for the most part, I think we take for granted today how easy it is to get water. But at a time when water, let alone clean and sustainable water, was harder to come by, something like a naturally occurring water supply had a lot of value, and in some cases came to be associated with the gods. And how do we show the gods we appreciate them? With presents. And thus began the custom of tossing gifts and coins into the water supply for the gods, accompanied by wishes for, health and good fortune. And this ritual, like when it comes to health, this ritual may have actually been a self-fulfilling prophecy, because there is this adjacent wishing well theory, and yeah, there are wishing well historical theories. There is this theory that says because coins at the time were typically made of copper and silver, when they were being thrown into the wishing wells, those metals have properties that kind of kill bacteria. So they were inadvertently cleansing the water from the wishing well, thus making that specific water healthier to drink. Now, of course, that's just one theory, and some of these customs go so far back in history that we have no way of knowing for sure why certain customs and certain rituals developed. We can only speculate. However, new discoveries are still being made all the time. Like, as recently as this year, there was a major discovery made in the archaeological world of wishing wells in 2023. There was a wishing well discovered by archaeologists in Bavaria earlier this year, dating back over 3,000 years to the Bronze Age, and it was filled with over 100 artifacts, many of which were made of clay, like cups and bowls, which, shockingly, were in fairly good condition because they're like 3,000 years old. So there were two particularly noteworthy things about this discovery. First, by analyzing the well itself, scientists were able to determine that at the time these items were placed into the well, the groundwater levels had dropped considerably, which implies that they were dealing with a drought, which further implies that these people were dealing with a bad harvest. Next, they were able to determine that these items were lowered into the well carefully as opposed to just tossed, like coins. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I feel like they figured that out because nothing was broken. So that implies that these things were being lowered into the well ritualistically, potentially as a sacrifice to end the drought. And I feel like this is the genesis of what, again, I would call a transactional wish. You're giving up something within your means, hoping that in exchange, you'll get something bigger and better in return. It's almost like playing the lottery. And much like those copper and silver coins purifying the water thousands of years ago, the modern practice of making a wish into a wishing well has inadvertently gone full circle and actually made several wishes come true. Because typically, the coins that are collected in a public fountain or wishing well at some point in the year will be collected, tallied up, and donated to a charity. So even if it's not your wish that's being granted, the act of tossing a coin into a fountain and making a wish is helping somebody's wish come true. Just one example, in 2022, Disney reported that they were able to donate over $30,000 to Give Kids the World just from the coins that were collected in fountains on Disney property. But to bring it back to Disney, specifically Snow White. Yes, Snow White's wishing well is iconic, but Snow White's not really abiding by standard historical wishing well rules. Like, she's not throwing anything into the well when she makes her wish, but she does have her own ritual. According to Snow White, if you make a wish into the well, that's all you have to do. And if you hear it echoing, your wish will soon come true. Basically, speak your wish into the well. If you hear it echo back, it's gonna come true. Honestly, I didn't look it up. I think the Disney animators invented this. I think it was just a device to justify having an objectively beautiful call and response song between Snow White and her echo. But like, in that respect, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs hasn't really affected how we use wishing wells. Like, I personally have never gone to a wishing well and verbalized my wish. I'm too lazy and self-conscious for that. I'd rather just give the wishing well money. So all that is to say that the idea of the wishing well predates Disney, and even though wishing wells are present in the Disney canon, Disney hasn't really changed how we think about them or how we use them. But I do think there is a case to be made for Disney helping romanticize the physical wishing well. I mean, look at any kid's storybook nowadays. There's probably a wishing well if there's like a cottage. Even if it's in the background, it's probably because of Disney. But anyway, let's move on to the second method of wishing in the Disney universe. A genie! This really only applies to one film, but it's a big one. Because of course, when you think of a magic wishing lamp and 3 wishes, the first thing that's going to come to mind is Aladdin and the Genie. Probably Disney's Aladdin and the Genie. And now the history of genies is pretty cool, and I'm going to be totally transparent right now. I am going to start telling you about the history of genies, but everything I'm about to say is from a script I wrote for a video that is on the channel from like almost 3.5 years ago. It was a video about why I personally felt like Robin Williams as the Genie was the best role in his career. But I also did a little preamble on the history of genies, and it took a lot of research. I was really proud of it. The research carries over to what we're talking about today. And also, nobody watched that video, so here's the best part of it, redone. Genies, or Jinn, have been a part of Middle Eastern culture and theology for centuries. And in terms of the storytelling we're familiar with now, they're probably best known for their appearances in 1001 Nights, aka the Arabian Nights, aka the entire collection of Middle Eastern folktales which inspired Disney's Aladdin, plus like every other version of Aladdin. The earliest on-screen genie was probably in George Méliès's 1905 silent film titled Tales of the Arabian Nights, but the most notable was Rex Ingram in The Thief of Baghdad. Now that is a movie that went on to inspire Disney's Aladdin a lot, and I mean a lot. Physically, Ingram's Genie was very similar to Disney's Genie, but in terms of the personality, he could not have been more different. Now this was a giant, imposing magical monster, taking inspiration from the folktale The Fisherman and the Jinn, and he had a lot of anger issues. Basically, this guy swore to kill the first person who freed him from the lamp, but then, after he got tricked back into the lamp, he bargained for his freedom in exchange for 3 wishes. Now understand that The Thief of Baghdad was a British-produced fantasy adventure film from the 1940s, and so cultural accuracy was not one of their priorities. But the movie did give us a slightly more accurate Jinn, or Genie, than we would end up seeing for most of the 20th century. I'm going to be the first to admit, I am not the person to dive into the theological and cultural history of the Jinn, but I do recommend you read up on it because there is a lot of fascinating stuff there. But essentially, the Jinn are not just magical beings whose sole purpose is to grant wishes and jump from master to master. They are highly powerful, supernatural beings with free will and a history of causing trouble for humans. There's a lot of rich nuance and details surrounding Jinn folklore, and all of that information would have been very common knowledge to the folks passing down the stories that eventually made their way into 1001 Nights. However, in the 1700s, those stories were translated into French by Antoine Galland. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he didn't pronounce Jinn right, so here we are. Anyway, when those stories eventually reached a European audience without context, all they had to go off of were the actions of the Jinn within the stories being presented to them. Stories of creatures with magic who found themselves under circumstances where they were granting wishes for humans. Pair that with Galland's translation of Jinn as Genie, and you get the creation of almost an entirely new entity.
Genie of the Lamp! Right here, direct from the lamp, right here for your very much wish fulfillment.
The 20th century is when genies started to take on a fun and a whimsical persona, largely because of a 1900 novel which was wildly popular called The Brass Bottle. The Brass Bottle ended up being adapted to stage and screen a bunch of times, most notably in 1964 with Burl Ives playing the Genie, and that eventually inspired the TV show I Dream of Genie. Do 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 bum bum bum. Oh, that's probably offensive. In both of those cases, a lot of the entertainment value came from having these kooky and crazy magical creatures causing mayhem for their masters. And all of a sudden, genies were funny. Fast forward to the 1990s. Now, we have this culturally accepted idea of a genie who grants wishes, paired with this pop culture norm of genies being funny. Throw in Robin Williams, and all of a sudden you get Disney's latest take on wish granting. And this is the type of wish that I characterized earlier as a power trip wish, and I'm going to stand by that. The whole idea of genie wish granting is just kind of weird, especially when you look at a potential origin being the fisherman and the Jinn. Like, he was only granting wishes to bargain for his freedom. Like, basically, when you have a genie, you have this stronghold over a magical creature, and then you force them to do your bidding. It's very house elf-like. Now, of course, you relinquish control over the genie after your third wish, but the whole structure, it just kind of moves into tricky territory because there are no regulations. I mean, it's exactly what Magnifico talks about in Wish. And I'm really not trying to be a Magnifico apologist. I'm just saying the man had some good ideas and he acted on them poorly. With a genie, there is nobody to decide if you are worthy of your wish. With a genie, there is nobody to decide if your wish could potentially hurt other people. Unlike the wishing well, where the whole structure is putting like the gods into a position of power to review and potentially grant your wish, when it comes to a genie, it's putting the magical godlike creature into a position of servitude and giving all the power to the lowly human. And just, humans can't be trusted. We know we're the worst. So, this is another case where Disney really didn't do much to create how we think about wishing when it comes to genies, but they did do a lot to strengthen and reinforce established stereotypes. But now let's move on to the third type of wish. The type of wish that I truly believe Disney has been instrumental in shaping the mythology of. Wishing on a star. When you wish upon a star. When you wish upon a star, from Disney's second full-length animated feature Pinocchio, it's really become the company's anthem. And I don't think I would be out of line if I were to say that that song and that movie is the reason that we are still wishing on stars. Now, Disney didn't invent the idea of wishing on a star, but they have taken ownership of it and revolutionized it. The concept of wishing on a star is often attributed to Greek mathematician and astronomer Ptolemy. What? Oh, sorry. The concept of wishing on a star is often attributed to Greek mathematician and astronomer Ptolemy, who claimed that shooting stars were the byproduct of the gods looking down on Earth. Basically, when they opened up the Tupperware lid of the sky to look down on us and spy on us and watch us, that's when the stars would fall to Earth, thus creating shooting stars. And so that became, well, if the stars are falling to the Earth, that must mean that the gods are watching us, therefore I might as well send my wish out to them. Maybe they'll hear it, maybe they'll grant it. I really hope he was a better mathematician than he was an astronomer. But here's something that I literally just learned while I was researching for this video, and maybe it was common knowledge for everyone else, but it kind of blew my mind. Apparently, shooting stars have not always been a sign of good luck. And there's different reasons for that. On the one hand, many cultures would associate a shooting star with a soul. So for some of them, if they saw a shooting star, that meant that a new soul was coming to Earth and a new baby was being born. It meant life, it meant good things. But on the other hand, some cultures would see a shooting star as a sign that a life was ending, a soul was leaving the earth, and that death would be imminent. Other cultures would see a shooting star as a bad omen, disrupting the otherwise orderly and consistent night sky. And some people believed that a shooting star was a literal demon or a fallen angel coming down to earth. And not even believed. I went onto TikTok. There are people who still believe this. I found a TikTok video of someone saying, stop wishing on a shooting star because you're giving your wish and your soul to the devil. But these are the same people who were scared when Hocus Pocus 2 came out and started making posts and TikToks that if they put the movie on Disney Plus, Bette Midler was going to crawl out of the TV and summon Satan or something.
Here she is, boys! Here she is, world!
But it was one monumental event that really changed the way people thought when they looked up at the sky and saw a shooting star. And that, of course, was the release of Pinocchio in 1941. No, I'm kidding. Pinocchio literally had absolutely no bearing on star science. November 12th. 1833. The Leonid meteor shower occurs, as it does every year around the same time, except on this particular year, this meteor shower was intense. It lasted 9 hours, and there were reportedly over 240,000 meteors lighting up the sky. If you look up illustrations that people did to try to document what they saw, it looks like the Magic Kingdom fireworks on crack. Now, this was the 1800s, so science was definitely a respected thing, but at the same time, nobody really knew what caused what they called falling stars. They knew it was a thing that happened. They knew it probably wasn't demons, but they also weren't thinking about the possibility of cosmic rocks, crashing down to Earth. Anyway, long story short, people thought the world was ending.
This is it? This is the last day? Help me! Help me!
When they realized the world was in fact not ending, astronomer Denison Olmsted began crowdsourcing data from anyone and everyone who witnessed the meteor shower, and that's when meteor science really took off and led to the discovery that a shooting star is in fact a meteor burning up as it enters into the Earth's atmosphere, which is what gives it that really pretty tail. Speaking of pretty tails, ooh, So by the time Pinocchio was released in 1941, there was over 100 years of scientific research that had gone into shooting stars, and the magic and the mystery behind them, it was pretty much gone. Wishing on a star, earnestly, really just became something for children, which brings us to that one iconic nursery rhyme. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight.
I wish I may, I wish I might have the wish I make tonight.
Those words are famously spoken by Geppetto in Pinocchio and infamously spoken by Tom Hanks in the terrible live-action remake of Pinocchio. And I had to dig to confirm whether or not Disney had actually written that poem, and they didn't. No one really knows who wrote it, but its first recorded appearance was in an 1866 anthology book titled Swallows on the Wing or Garden Square Springs of Delight, a medley of prose and verse by Will de Grace. When you say it, you become Irish. So by the 1940s, it was probably just one of those nursery rhymes that like everyone on the playground inexplicably somehow knows. Like Miss Mary Mack. Now, why is this important? Simply because before Disney's Pinocchio was made, I don't think that nursery rhyme or the concept of wishing on a star was all that important. I mean, sure it existed, but like nobody cared. And I want to make one thing very clear. Wishing on a star did not come from the Pinocchio novel. Pinocchio doesn't come to life in the way he does in the movie. In the book, he's just kind of always alive. Like the block of wood that Pinocchio is carved out of is already sort of sentient before the puppet is made. There's a whole backstory where Geppetto's neighbor is a carpenter and he gets a piece of wood that he wants to turn into a table leg, but then he starts to like carve into it, the wood starts making sounds, it freaks him out, he's like, well, I don't want this possessed piece of demon wood, you take it, Geppetto, and then Geppetto carves it into a puppet and the puppet is alive, because it was always alive. So the big takeaway here is that Geppetto wasn't really looking to have a kid in the novel, it just kind of happened and he had to go with it. Tale as old as time, really. Fast forward a couple decades, Disney's Pinocchio was the first major film adaptation of the novel. It was the first talking film adaptation of the novel. So consider what that means. This whole idea of Geppetto longing for a child and Pinocchio being brought to life because of his wish, that was a Disney invention. They identified that audiences needed to care about Geppetto and Pinocchio and that relationship, and so I'm guessing that that's what led to the idea of a wish being the catalyst that brings Pinocchio to life instead of him just being a block of demon wood. And then they paired it with that nursery rhyme about wishing on a star. They animated it with that absolutely gorgeous shot of a solitary person looking out of his window at a star filled with hope. And the rest is history. In the interests of telling a good story, they combined all of these elements and essentially created the convention of wishing on a star, which, again, I consider to be the purest form of making a wish. There's no exchange, there's no weird power dynamic, it's just one person putting a dream out into the universe and hoping for a response. And of course, wishing is a universal thing, but without Disney, and specifically without Pinocchio, I don't know that I would ever think to wish on a star. And I think it's safe to say that Disney's Wish and all the movies in between Pinocchio and Wish would not be nearly as magical. So even though Pinocchio is a nightmarish hellscape of a movie to watch, it gave us this one little piece of magic. Well, alongside countless other things I did for the studio. And I'm thankful for it. And with that, friends, this concludes yet another episode of Teacup for One. Now let me know in the comments section down below, what is your preferred method of wishing? And if you had one wish, and one wish only, what would it be? And if you want to be the first to know when I release more videos talking about Disney, history, Shakespeare, cats, Funko Pops, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. And if you haven't subscribed already, it is so easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me again today, everyone. My name is Matt and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Teacup for One. Go away.